All right, so tonight we're going to talk Unit 4. Unit 4 is on political ideologies and beliefs, excuse me. So Unit 4 starts with, sorry, I think I'm catching whatever my kid had. Ugh. But Unit 4 starts with the core values of um, American political beliefs. Okay, so there's four of them to be aware of. Five of them, excuse me. So there's individualism, equality of opportunity, free enterprise, the rule of law, and limited government. Again, individualism is the idea that we're all unique as individuals and that we are free to do what we want as long as we're not infringing on the rights of others. Okay, so whether I have a belief that you guys might disagree with or vice versa, that's an example of individualism. Okay. Equality of opportunity in the United States, we tend to hold the idea that people are maybe entitled to having similar opportunities as everybody else, regardless of race, gender, creed, whatever it might be. That understand that is different than economic equality. In the United States, that is something that, though some people would say, hey, that's a good thing, others would say, hey, something like raising the minimum wage or something along those lines, maybe may not have the greatest economic effect, and that's something that the government should stay out of. But equality of opportunity and economic equality are two very different things. So that's something else to, again, keep in mind. In the United States, then going off our economic system, we value what is called free enterprise. That is the idea of private ownership of businesses, people owning the rights of production. If Mason, if you want to start a crab bucket stand someday and sell lobsters, you certainly can do that. Assuming that you're licensed and you meet all the other, local ordinances or federal ordinances, whatever might exist. So that's something to be aware of too. It's the same reason why like Apple, Nike, name any business or any corporation, they all operate under free enterprise. Excuse me. So something to be aware of there. It's going to be really embarrassing when you guys go back and view this and you're going to see me sneezing on the Zoom, but it is what it is. I'm here. So free enterprise, again, our economic system, private ownership of goods. Business owners tend to want the government to stay out of their business unless that involvement benefits them, right? So something else to be aware of. Another core value is what we call rule of law. Rule of law that means that the law is the same for me and you. It's the same law that everybody follows. Again, our justice system, I think we could all think of examples in history, maybe even somewhat recent history, where people get or would disagree that everybody is subjugated to the same laws and regulations. It seems like celebrities, politicians, those who are wealthy, so on, so on. That sometimes that's always not the case, that they might be treated differently. Again, they can also afford really good legal representation, so that probably helps them to some degree. But again, rule of law, something that we value, that nobody is quote unquote above the law. And then the last one is limited government. Just as it sounds, government is not all powerful. That there needs to be a system in place that limits the power of our government so that we don't live in a dictatorship or totalitarian type of regime. Okay, so again, 5 core values: individualism, equality of opportunity, free enterprise, rule of law, and limited government. Any questions on those? Again, none of that is political ideology, how we interpret those things and what we value. And one value being maybe more so value than the other. That's where you get into some of the ideologies. But again, those are just the values, and how our parties go about promoting those things or which ones they might value more than another one. That gives us a read into political ideologies. Okay. So ultimately, then, how we learn our political views comes through this process that we call political socialization. Anybody remember what's the key factor of your guys's political belief, especially at this stage in life? Who influences, or where do you guys learn mostly your political views? And please don't say me, because I have never talked my political beliefs with you.
Social media.
Social media is a big one. Yeah, I'd say so. And I would tend to agree that's probably one or two. What the AP is going to want you to say, if you see a question about the biggest influence in learning your political beliefs, especially early in life, is right away, like at 17, 18 years old, your guys' age, your political beliefs are going to be most influenced by, not by what, but by who?
Parents?
Yeah, your family, 100%, 100%. And that does not mean that that'll be the case your entire life. Like my parents and I would say there are certain things politically that we very much disagree on. So we try not to talk about those things. Otherwise it leads to some very, not so great dinner conversation. But especially at this age in your life, like you guys are around your families the most, your friends, your peer groups, and those individuals are probably going to affect your political socialization the most at this stage in life. When you get a little bit older and maybe you move, maybe you get a certain type of job, those things will probably influence how you feel too, politically. But again, right away in life, when you start learning your political beliefs and values, those things are mostly most affected by your parents and how they feel. Okay, because that's who you're around probably the most. Other things we talk about, like globalization, again, how our world's becoming interconnected. That's kind of like the social media thing. Again, at no point in history have we been more interconnected than we are now as a planet. Again, the internet and the digital age have really played a huge pivotal role in that. And then as your life goes on, like we had already said, that your political beliefs will probably change. Okay. And they might change, they might totally change, they might partially change. But based on where you're at in your life, we have what's called the life cycle effect. Generally speaking, as people become older, like retirement age, start paying their own taxes, they probably get more concerned about those things. Like right now, most of you, right? I know a lot of you have part-time jobs and you know that there's money coming out of your check, for your income taxes. But, and I don't say this to be mean. I don't say it to be cruel. It's nothing like that. But like right now, as young people, the understanding of what tax dollars are used for, like you guys have a very, good basic understanding of that. But right now you're just like, hey, I wish I had more. I wish my paycheck was more. But then it becomes like, maybe there's something going on in a local community, like our community soon, where there's going to be a referendum vote. If you guys haven't heard about that, they're the residents of the Central Cass School District are gonna vote this fall on raising the tax mills. So in other words, if this vote passes, property taxes could be raised X percent per year to pay for the things the school's trying to do, like whether it's building another building, whether it's a maintenance fund, whatever it is. Okay. And I'll let you guys do your own research on that. I'm not going to influence you one way or the other. But as people who don't own property, as students, you probably like, oh, well, yeah. And, most people would say, hey, we want to have a good school. But now we start talking about raising taxes. People get kind of bent about that. As a taxpayer, I can totally relate. So depending on where you're at in your life, we call that a life cycle effect. And that's ultimately going to shape, how you feel politically, whether it's a building fund, whether it has to do with how Social Security is being managed, or things along those lines. Okay. So that's something to keep in mind. We call that a life cycle effect. Don't confuse that with generational effect. Okay. So a generational effect, then it's like what major things that happen in your generation that shape your political views. So like in my case, I'm 34 years old. Something that played and I only realize this because I've thought about it. Something that's played a tremendous role in how I feel politically is 9/11. That was a major event, right? That unquestionably a major, like, generational thing. And so that is something that is very much that has influenced me in the way I feel about certain political subjects. Okay, whether it's keeping America safe, war on terror, so on, so on, so on. It doesn't matter how I feel about those things, but I'm telling you that 9/11 in my case is something that played a major role in that. In my parents' case, like the Vietnam War played a major role in how they feel about the government, right? When Vietnam was going on and maybe the US government wasn't super forthcoming about certain things that were happening. That's something that played a major role, in during their time period. Your guys' parents, I'd imagine a lot of your parents probably grew up in maybe the late 70s, 80s, 90s. There's things going on with the economy that and otherwise. Oh, excuse me. That's gonna be embarrassing when we watch that later. But there's gonna be things that happen then that influence them now too, like how they feel. You know, maybe sometimes you feel comfortable, ask your parents about that. Like, what are some of the things that happened in your lifetime politically that have maybe shaped the way you feel? Okay. And that's a generational thing. Okay. And it's nobody's fault. It's life, right? As things happen, opinions change, opinions develop. Again, nobody has a political opinion when they're born. Nobody comes out of the womb saying, "Oh, well, go Democrats or go Republicans." Nobody does that. Okay, that's not a thing. Like when my son was born in July, he does not have an opinion one way or the other. He just wants to eat and sleep. And right now he just wants his ear infection to go away. So at some point I'm sure, he'll probably have an opinion and develop one, and that's great. Okay. Any questions on that? So again, that's some real basic stuff here thus far. Those of you that came in a second late, no problem. I am recording, so you can go back and watch me sneeze, gag, however, on the recording later if you want. Okay, so the other thing that we get into before we start touching on ideologies, the other thing that we get into then is how we measure political opinions. Okay, and we use something called a public opinion poll. A public opinion poll, it can have a variety of different formats. Understand that there are certain things that influence polling results, right? Anybody remember what are some of those factors that can influence polling results? And I would say they're like very kind of basic, maybe even obvious things. What are one or two things that influence polling results?
Like the region that they live in or the amount of people that they poll.
For sure. Yeah. How big is the area? Where is the area? That's something that's totally going to skew results one way or the other. What else? And you kind of touched on a big one there. It's who's being asked.
Race, like race background, parents' political beliefs.
Yeah, demographics. Anything, right? Age, race. Are you a first generation American? Are you not? Do you own property? Are you college educated? Are you financially well off? Are you not financially well off? Like those are all things that could skew results. And so I guess what the point I'm trying to hit on here is to get an accurate public opinion poll, which is a very difficult thing to do, is the one big thing that needs to be present is a random sample. It has to be kind of all over the place as far as who's being asked. Like if you go and ask a bunch of people living in Los Angeles, okay, how they feel about President Biden, I'm guessing you're going to get a different result than if you went and asked a bunch of folks that live in Western North Dakota. Okay, that's very obvious. Okay, I'm guessing the people in LA or the bigger populated areas are probably gonna be more pleased with his work. Just as I'd say if you ask the people of Fargo compared to the people of Bismarck or somewhere farther west in the state, if you ask them the same question, you're probably gonna see two different things. So a random sample is super important, right? To make a poll scientific, right? To make it accurate, a random sample is necessary. Okay. And question wording is another one. We had done some polls in class, and a lot of you I can remember you guys made the comment that, hey, I wish I had more options. Like instead of just answering yes or no this way or that way, question wording is something that plays a major factor in polling results. And a lot of these places that are collecting data, they are, especially the media, right? Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, whatever you name the media outlet, they are very creative in how they ask questions, especially if there's a certain result that they're hoping to publish. Okay. And that's something else I know that we'd examined in class. So question wording is a big one. And then ultimately what's the format of the question? Are they multiple choice? Is it fill in the blank? Is it, you get 4 options? What does that look like? And that's something else that can greatly affect polling results. Okay. And so for that, then an opinion poll is simply describing something that we use to measure public opinion. And then we have 3 different types of polls that we talk about in class. So we have what's called a benchmark poll, a tracking poll, and then an entrance or an exit poll. So like right now, the Republican Party, they're trying to narrow down who their candidate for the 2024 election is going to be. And right now, for all intents and purposes, it appears that it's going to be Donald Trump. Okay, is what it is. Just as the Democrats up here are going to nominate current President Biden. Okay, is what it is. But the term that you hear being used a lot in the media is polling, that, Donald Trump is polling the highest among Republicans. Joseph Biden is polling the highest among Democrats. And what that is looking for could be a couple of different things. If it happens early, that's what you call a benchmark poll. And so we're probably beyond that now and where we're at with our presidential election for 2024. I'd say right now it's more of like a tracking poll. A tracking poll is something like data that's gathered over the course of a campaign, or maybe even over the course of a term of office where excuse me, where the public is going to be asked about how they feel about XYZ issue or XYZ person. Okay. Then an entrance and an exit poll, those are things that are taken as voters are either entering or exiting the polling place. So come November, what is election day? It's going to be like November 4th, 5th, 6th, something like that. It's always the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So it'll be early. Will never be November 1st though. Okay. Just keep that in the back of your minds. Election day will never be November 1st. Because if a Tuesday is the first day of the month, you have to wait for the first Monday. So it'd be the next week, but neither here nor there. But what the media will try to do is, right, horse race journalism, they want to predict a winner. That's what sells. And so an entrance poll is like, let's say Grace Letchok is walking into the Governor's Inn in Castleton to go and vote. Okay. And somebody is standing outside the door and says, oh, hey, how do you plan on voting? Who do you plan on voting for president? And Grace might choose to answer the question, or she might choose not to, just the same as Elise, Mason, Drea, Kyla, Austin, Riker, whoever. Okay. But what the media likes to do is they like to try to gauge that because they want to try to predict a winner. Because again, that's what gets people to watch their programs. So that's an entrance poll. As people are leaving, and this is not illegal. As long as you're not being harassed, it is not illegal to do this. And then an exit poll would be as somebody is leaving said polling place, they might ask, well, who did you vote for? Did you vote for Biden? Did you vote for Trump? Did you vote for Daffy Duck? Did you vote for Tim the Toolman Taylor? That's an exit poll. Okay. And so those are different types of polls that can be used to gauge what's going to happen in an election or how people are voting. And then that can be broken down into demographics, age, race, gender, so on, so on, so on. Okay. Any questions on those things? No? All right. Super. I am going to share my screen here. Just give me a second so I can set it up. So we are going to talk through our three main or our three different political ideologies, and we're going to kind of compare them. We are going to compare them based on conservative, liberal, and libertarian. So those are our three major kind of competing ideologies. So I will share my screen for this just because there's a table I like to use when we look at this. There you guys go. You should be able to see my screen now. Yes, I know I need to organize my desktop. Thank you, Mason, for reminding me. Okay. But here you go. So here are five different areas of how the conservatives, the liberals, and the libertarians feel about certain policy areas. Okay. So again, those that are conservative tend to they're going to tend to vote Republican. Those who are more so liberal tend to support Democrats. Those who are libertarian could go either way, but they might support a libertarian candidate. Again, the two major parties in the United States are the Republicans and the Democrats. The Libertarian Party is like a third party or a minor party, however you want to call it. So in the area of government spending, and again, we'll just try to break this down a little bit. In the area of government spending, generally the conservatives or the Republicans are going to try to cut down on entitlement programs or social programs, try to cut government spending there. The one area then where the conservatives tend to like to spend more money is on security and military. Okay. Whereas those who are more so liberal or support the Democrats tend to favor more spending for programs, whether it's an aid program like TAMP or Social Security or whatever it might be, but they tend to not support as much spending on things such as defense. Now, is that to say that Democrats are anti-military? No, that's not what I'm saying here. But a generalization is that those who are conservative Republican are going to tend to support more money being spent on defense than they will on social programs. Okay. Now the libertarians can kind of go either way on that. Again, the phrase that we use from the libertarians is get off my lawn, right? Just stay out of it. Okay. Again, the libertarians more or less believe, whether they're conservative or liberal, they more or less believe the only role the national government should have is in protecting them. Okay. Like with a military. And that's more or less it. So, like in the area of spending, the libertarians would say, why spend the money? Okay, let's just cut all the spending. The only spending that we should, the only spending we should have is if in the event there is some sort of catastrophe where we need aid, right? Otherwise, government just stay out of it. We talk again, just because we've kind of compared spending in military and crime and punishment. Again, the libertarians overall would say less money being spent on defense, unless there is some sort of catastrophe. And the libertarians are also those who tend to support the decriminalization of what you call a victimless crime. So, for example, those who are libertarian would tend to support like the decriminalization of drugs. A lot of libertarians would say, hey, if you're an adult and you want to do this, then do it. As long as it doesn't affect me, do it. Right. So something like the legalization of marijuana, that is something that the libertarians would be all in favor of. And as a matter of fact, some libertarians would probably even argue that excuse me. Some libertarians would probably even argue that the government should stay out of that in the first place, that they don't really have a role in saying what people can ingest into their systems versus what they can't. Same thing with like marriage laws. The libertarians would say, hey, government should just stay out of it. That's between consenting adults. And as long as they're consenting adults, then whose business is it anyways? Okay. So then getting into something like privacy, again, the conservative Republicans tend to support more of the traditional values. Okay. Whereas the liberals or Democrats would say, stay out of it. Okay. The libertarians, again, we kind of just described that. They'd say the government should just stay out of it in general. It's not their business. Okay. On something like education and religion, again, those that are conservative Republican, they tend to support. It's not that they're against public education, but somebody who is conservative would say, especially in this area, right? And it's possible you can be to be a conservative in one area and more so liberal in others, right? That's or vice versa, more liberal in others and less conservative, or however, whatever combination you can think of. But in like the topic of education, somebody who's conservative would say, okay, my kid's going to public school. I would prefer that my child went to, say, like the Fargo Classical Academy. That's the one that I just think of because it was in the news recently. Again, that's a private school focusing on classical education, like philosophy, Latin. There is a religious element to it as well. And so somebody who is conservative on education would say, all right, well, I pay taxes, we'll just say in the Central Cass School District. And I know that my child's education, because there's a dollar amount on your education every year, right? And I want to say in Castleton, I want to say it's like $10,000 or $13,000 per pupil is ultimately what the price is. So somebody who's conservative on education might say, hey, I don't really want my kid to go to public school. I prefer that they went to the Fargo Classical Academy. I should be able to pull my tax dollars and get a voucher for my child to go to school where I want. We call that a school choice thing. Okay. Which would create some challenges in public education because now you talk about funding. Okay. But somebody would argue, well, if I'm paying taxes, I should get some say so in where that's going in this area education. Whereas those that tend to be more so liberal in education would be staunch supporters of public education, and would say, hey, if you want to go to private school, then that's on you. You got to find a way to pay for it. You can't take your tax dollars out. Okay. The libertarians, again, depending on if they're conservative or liberal, would probably say government should just stay out of education in general. And people, if you want to go to private school, then go to private school. And if you don't want to go to private school, then don't. Right. That's more or less what the libertarians would say. Again, they're an interesting bunch. And then on liberty and order, it depends on the topic on this. I kind of disagree with the graphic, but the graphic says that those are more so conservative favor social order, which I would say to a degree in general is probably true. Those that are conservative are going to oppose things generally like, say, abortion or same-sex marriage, things along those lines. And again, liberty is another word for freedom. And they would say, nope, traditional values, we need to have, law and order. Okay. Well, think of what is one liberty that the conservatives are very strong on saying that everybody should be able to do this. What is it?
A gun, having
Yes.
guns.
Guns. Yep. Second Amendment, right? Every conservative ever, right? Second Amendment, can't take it away, right? And so again, it depends on the issue. Whereas the graphic also says that Democrats tend to favor social liberty, which I would say in cases is true, right? The Democrats tend to support more of the pro-choice with abortion. They tend to support um, more of the laws that allow for and protect same-sex marriages, rights for ethnic minorities, so on, so on, so on, right? But then on the topic of guns, it seems to be different, where it's usually the more so liberals, Democrats that tend to be more in favor of gun control. Okay. Um, the libertarians, get off my lawn, right? Stay out of it. Let me do what I want as long as I'm not hurting anybody else and I'm not violating anybody. Well, let me do what I want. Okay, that's the libertarians. Again, it can sway either more so conservative or more so liberal. But those are some of the big policy areas. So again, feel comfortable. You should feel comfortable being able to kind of identify some of those differences because you might see them on the test. Okay. Last thing here then is on economic policy. So the more so liberal crowd is going to support the Keynesian theory. Keynesian theory is that the government should get involved in the economy when things get bad. A good example of Keynesian theory when that was very prevalent in the United States would be like during the Great Depression, right? With FDR's New Deal. Government's going to deficit spend to create these programs to help people. It's going to cause a debt, but it's going to stimulate the economy, and that's the government's job. Okay. Somebody who supports Keynesian theory, that's what they would say. Generally speaking, more so government regulation and involvement is more so supported by the Democrats, more so. Whereas something like a supply side economics, that is more so supported by the conservatives, saying that, hey, the government should just stay out of it. The market's gonna do what it does. It's gonna fluctuate. And people need to be prepared for that. Okay. And that ultimately, if the government wants to benefit the economy, they should cut taxes for the big corporations and for the wealthy, because then they will spend more money. And spending more money, that's going to create more jobs and things along those lines. So again, we've seen examples of both in U.S. history, right? New Deal era during the Depression, we saw Keynesian theory. During the 80s with Ronald Reagan, we saw more of the supply side. And I would say there's, like anything politically, there's pros and cons, arguments, good arguments for and good arguments against either theory. Okay. So then we have to compare fiscal and monetary policy. Okay. So again, fiscal policy is managed by Congress and the president. Fiscal policy deals with like tax and how much the government is spending. And that is determined by Congress and the president. They set fiscal policy, tax rates, how much we're going to spend per year, what that government money is going to be spent on. Again, there was just a big agreement a couple of weeks ago, actually, when we were moving to DC for the close-up trip, dealing with the budget ceiling and how much more debt the government's going to be willing to take on, which the budget ceiling has been raised time and time again, which is also why we are, 30 some trillion dollars in debt last time I checked. I try not to look because it makes me sad. But that is managed fiscal policy, taxes, government spending, that is managed by Congress and the president. Okay, now something like monetary policy, that is managed by our Federal Reserve. Again, the Federal Reserve is like the banking system for the United States, but it's important to understand that the Federal Reserve is totally independent. It's not a government agency. The people who head the Federal Reserve are put into those positions. The Board of Presidents or Board of Governors, excuse me, is what they're called. Those individuals are appointed by the president. They serve a term. They're confirmed by the Senate as well. But otherwise, like the Federal Reserve is totally independent. And that was done on purpose by the Wilson administration back in the late 19 teens, right around World War I, because they didn't like, the theory is we should have an independent bank because then the government can't control it. And so if we just wanted to say print more money or something like that, that's something that, could get us in big trouble, right? That just happened where in Zimbabwe not so long ago, where they decided they were going to pay off their national debt by just printing more dollar bills, y'all. And here you go. We're just going to repay ourselves. Well, if they start doing that, what happens? Well, inflation, right? To the nth degree, your currency pretty soon has no value whatsoever. And so by having a Federal Reserve, they're going to set what's called monetary policy. Monetary policy deals with things like interest rates. and how much money is in circulation. So like right now, Bree and I have been looking at buying a new car. We just went through the process the other day, actually, of getting pre-approved by the bank for an auto loan. And again, a lot of banks are going to have similar interest rates right now because it's all based off of the prime interest rate. Right now, that prime interest rate's a little bit higher because of economic conditions, right? There's when the interest rates are raised, the government is trying to discourage people to some degree from borrowing money in fear of economic issues. But at the same token, like when interest rates are low, they want people to borrow, and that usually tends to mean that inflation is lower, unemployment's lower, so on, so on, so on. Okay. But monetary policy, dealing with interest rates and money supply, that is all controlled by the Federal Reserve. Okay. Questions on that? Anybody? Got 2 minutes here. So that is unit 4. Very, very quickly. Other things. Okay. So let's talk other things. Again, test is May 6th. So I will send out some email reminders about that. So that's fast approaching. About a month away. Crazy to think, right? I want to start doing 2 reviews a week. So we're going to start doing a review on Sunday night. We'll start this week. We're going to do reviews at 8:30. Okay. So we'll review again Sunday night at 8:30. We'll review the following Wednesday at 8:30. And we're going to start doing 2 of these a week leading up to the AP exam. I was not in school today. I plan on being back tomorrow. Depends on the health of my youngsters. And I'm going to print off. I have access to some old AP tests that can be shared with you guys, like multiple choice questions. And so I'll share those with you. I'll print off copies. What I would encourage you to do is to go through and time yourself in answering those multiple choice questions, right? Because you're each section of the AP exam, well, the multiple choice is timed. The FRQs, you get X amount of time to answer all of them. But I would encourage you to start doing some of those. And so I will have paper copies for you guys probably by the end of the day tomorrow. Just have to have a second to print them off and run off some copies. But plan on starting to do 2 reviews a week all the way up to the AP exam. So we'll review again on Sunday. That would be, what day would that be? The 7th. We'll review this Sunday at 8:30 p.m. We'll review the following Wednesday at 8 p.m. And we'll do 2 of these a week leading up to our AP exam. We still need to cover units 2 and 5. Those are the big ones. And we got to do an argument FRQ. Okay. Time's going to expire. You guys have a great evening. We'll see you in school tomorrow. Make good choices. Bob Ross in the crab bucket.
Crab bucket.